Greetings, my dear viewers. It is I, Drayon, and welcome back to a raw guide to Dungeons & Dragons. This is part 2 of my 100 subscriber special, a guide to Homebrewery. So, that obviously sounds counterintuitive. Rules as written and homebrew. That doesn't seem to fit. If you watched part 1, you will know that there are a set of rules within Dungeons & Dragons to help you create your own homebrew. Quick disclaimer, I do not recommend doing any form of homebrewery if you do not know the core rules of Dungeons & Dragons, not just how to create your own homebrew. This is part 1 of the Raw series. We're going over each of the different homebrew guides in order as presented in the Dungeon Master's Guide. The first one being how to create your own monster. Now, while this guide does start on page 273 of the Dungeon Master's Guide, for the purposes of this video, we are skipping over to page 275 for the full guide on how to create your very own monster stat block, as page 273 and 274 are just a quick guide to make a small, quick and easy, rough stat block that you can use for one encounter. This is going to be the full-on tutorial. And I'm doing tutorial because we are actually going to be creating a monster stat block as we go through this guide, so you understand what exactly is going on with each of these steps. So, sit back, grab some popcorn, and jot down any notes you might need while we go through this guide to homebrewing our own monster stats block. Now, first off, we need a name for our monster, and I have actually picked the perfect creature to make a stat block for, and that is the Sliver Queen from Wizards of the Coast's own trading card game, Magic the Gathering. So now we know what we're making. Let's go ahead and move on to step 2. We need to figure out the size of our monster. And this is actually going to affect some other stats later on. Not everything, but it is going to affect a few of our stats. In the illustration of the card Change of Heart, we know that Sliver Queen is a size category or 2 above the planeswalker known as Karn. So, we'll say, for the purposes of this build, that the Sliver Queen is size category huge. Now for our monster type. Beast, humanoid, undead, whatever. For our build today, we are going to pick the Aberration monster type, and we're going to give it a subcategory of Sliver. This doesn't really affect too much of the stat block, it is just there to identify what type of creature your players are going to be facing. Because there are certain class abilities and even some spells that do affect certain types of creatures, and it does help that you know, or at least your players know, that certain spells and abilities do not work. Or do work. Moving on to part 4, or step 4, we have the alignment. Now, this isn't the most important thing in the world anymore, since just about any creature can have any sort of alignment. But because the Sliver Queen is more about survival, so it would make sense to have the Sliver Queen's alignment and therefore any other slivers be of neutral alignment. They don't really care about anything outside of the hive. They just care about themselves and other slivers. As it is stated in the lore, the Sliver Queen cares about each member of its hive because it is a part of its own being. Moving on to step 5, we now need ability scores and modifiers. So let's go ahead and just drop in some random stats that could make sense for a creature of the Sliver Queen's size. I would say a 22 strength, 22 constitution, which will be a +6 modifier. 18 in charisma, that's a +4 modifier. Wisdom, let's do 14, making it a +2. Intelligence, it's still very animalistic in nature. I would say only a 10 in intelligence. And this is a very beefy creature. And, well, it's called the Queen. It's kind of like a queen bee. I would say it has very hard time moving, so only a 6 in dexterity, giving it a -2 modifier. Now, some of these stats will affect other stats going forward, so make sure you keep these in mind. Now we need the expected challenge rating. If you go a page before, on page 274, you actually have this nifty little table on different stats for certain challenge ratings, and we will be referring to this every so often and for the final challenge rating at the near end of this tutorial. For our purposes, I'm going to suspect or expect that the Sliver Queen is of challenge rating 25. So if you look here, the expected stats for a CR 25 creature would have a proficiency bonus of a +8, a armor class of 19, rough hit points around 581 to 625, an attack bonus of +12, damage per round is 213 to 230, and save DC of 21. Now, some of these stats we'll go over in a bit, but that is the expected challenge rating and the expected stats one could see from a monster of that CR category. Moving on to 7, we're going to go over armor class. Now, I'm going to go with an 18. There is a lot of armor on the Sliver Queen, yes, so one would suspect that would be a little bit higher. However, there are a lot of exposed fleshy bits on the Sliver Queen, so that would make it a little bit more vulnerable to attacks. Not by much, mind you. In fact, I probably would have gone for a lower armor class for the Sliver Queen because of how much flesh is exposed on her. But I decided to go for an 18 because there is a good amount of armor still on her. Moving on to hit points, like I said previously, there is a rough hit point gap. So I wanted to go ahead and go over what that might be. Now, for our size category, we actually get a hit dice. Since we are huge, that is a D12, which has an average of 6.5 hit points per hit dice. I would estimate about 500 hit points would make sense for the Sliver Queen, which is actually a little bit lower than average. So that would give us 70 D12 with an extra 45 hit points to work with. Moving on to step 9, we need damage vulnerabilities, resistances, and immunities. Now, this doesn't affect us too much on the vulnerabilities department. It is just resistances and immunities that are going to affect our challenge rating in the future. The damage immunities that we're going to go with are going to be bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage from weapons that are not adamantine. So, since we have damage immunities, 3 of them to be precise, we actually get our modifier down to our hit points, giving it an extra times 1.25. This does increase our hit points to 625 hit points, or 92d12 plus 27. Make sure you keep these hit points in mind for the end of the build to calculate the final challenge rating. So make sure you keep that in mind. Next is attack bonuses. Our strength is a 6 and our proficiency bonus is an 8. This will give us a total attack bonus of 14 to hit with any melee attacks. For damage, the rough damage output would be 213 to 230 as we had discussed earlier. I would say that is a good-ish. Hold on, something's wrong. A good-ish. There we go. A good-ish damage pool, but I want to go roughly 250 damage per round of combat. And that is because we will be having a couple of features that will let us do damage outside of our turn. Moving on to save DCs, we actually do not need to calculate this since we do not have any abilities or will be getting any abilities that require our enemies to make a DC save of any kind. Step number 13 are special traits, actions, and reactions. We're going to go ahead and grab the typical abilities that we can see from other monsters: the adamantine weapons, legendary resistance, magic resistance, and the siege monster features. Legendary resistance actually affects our outcome later, in that we get an extra 10 hit points added to our total hit points. We also get magic resistance adding 2 to our effective AC. This does not change our overall AC, this is just for calculations later. Furthermore, we are going to grab a feature that I like to call Hive Mind. This is very similar to the telepathic hub feature of the Elder Brain, but it is limited to slivers. So, I thought that would be pretty good and flavorful. For actions, I wanted to go with a multi-attack. This will let us do 3 melee attacks each turn, 1 with tail and 2 with claws. For our claw attack, we have a reach of 5 feet, 1 target. We use our attack bonus that we calculated earlier, a plus 14, and we're going to do 42 damage, or 8d8 plus 6. Our tail attack is going to do a reach of 10 feet on 1 target, 14 to hit, and 83 damage, or 14d8 plus 6. We also have another action here, Spawn Sliver. This gives us a recharge of 5 to 6 on a 6-sided die. The Sliver Queen will summon 1d4 plus 2 Sliver Broodlings in an unoccupied space within 5 feet. And finally, our legendary actions. We're going to do a claw attack with just 1 action. And we also have a spawning action. Now I want to change this real quick because I just thought of something a while ago. for this. And I thought it would make a little bit more sense for the Sliver Queen. There we go. So, spawning. The Sliver Queen summons one sliver of challenge rating 2 or lower to a space within 5 feet of it. I thought that kind of made sense for the Sliver Queen. Being able to summon a more powerful sliver when it is in trouble, but only being able to summon one of the broodlings as a normal action. Moving on to step 14, we need speed. Once again, our queen is very bulky and probably can't move very fast, so we're going to go with a 20-foot movement speed. Now for our saving throw bonuses. I would say Constitution, Intelligence, Wisdom, and Charisma gain these bonuses. And since we get a proficiency bonus of 8, that increases each of the saving throw bonuses to the following: 14 for Constitution, 8 for Intelligence, 10 for Wisdom, and 12 for Charisma. And since we have 3 or more saving throw bonuses, that will increase our effective AC by 2. This does not change our actual AC, like I said previously. This is just for calculation purposes to find out our challenge rating at the end. Speaking of, our final challenge rating is step 16. The hit points, 635, is equal to that of a CR26, while the effective AC, which is 22, is equal to that of a CR30. Add these together and divide by 2, and you get our defensive CR of 28. Our attack bonuses is a 14, that is equivalent to a CR30. While our 251 damage per round is the equivalent damage per round that a CR27 creature is able to deal, giving us an offensive CR of 28. Now you would take both the defensive CR and the offensive CR, add them together, and divide by 2 to get your final challenge rating, which, oddly enough, is 28. This will give us 120,000 experience points. So, pretty good. It was a little higher than I expected, but it is still doable. Still an effective boss monster to face. For your skill bonuses, we don't actually need these for this particular build, and they don't affect the challenge rating at all if we had gone for skill bonuses. Next is condition immunities. The charmed, petrified, poisoned, prone, and stunned conditions would actually be perfect here. So our Sliver Queen cannot be charmed, petrified, poisoned, prone, or stunned. I put down cannot be petrified because, well, in senses, we have blind sight for 60 feet. The Sliver Queen has no eyes, so it would not make sense to be able to be petrified, and it would only make sense for it to be able to see using blind sight, up to 60 feet. Also, we need to calculate the passive perception, which is equal to 10 plus our wisdom modifier, which is a plus 2. So, 12 passive perception. Not bad. And for the final step, we need languages. We're going to do telepathy of up to 5 miles. And we're also going to give it the Sliver language. Now, I would recommend having the telepathy limited to just slivers because of the hive mind feature that we had from earlier. And with that, that is the end of this build and this tutorial. I do hope that you enjoyed. And if you want to see the stats block for the Sliver Broodling, I will make sure to have that on either my Twitter or Discord servers some point over the weekend. If you want to get to either of those pages, I will have them in the link in the description down below. Otherwise, you can probably find me on Discord under the username Drehon Osama of Discord, and Twitter as Drehon_YT. With that being said, I hope you do enjoy, and I'll see you in part 3.